The gunshot shattered the calm of Silver Creek, like lightning split in a clear sky, sending Katherine Parker diving for cover behind a water trough as bullets splintered the wooden boardwalk where she'd been standing mere seconds before. This wasn't how she'd imagined her arrival in Wyoming territory in 1878, but then again, nothing in Katherine's life had gone according to plan since her father's passing 3 months prior. "Stay down, miss," a deep voice commanded from somewhere behind her. Katherine pressed herself flat against the dirt, her heart hammering against her ribs as more shots rang out, followed by the sound of breaking glass and men shouting. The fine fabric of her traveling dress was already ruined, caked with mud and dust, but that seemed the least of her concerns with bullets flying overhead. The shooting stopped as abruptly as it had begun. In the ringing silence that followed, Katherine heard the sound of boot heels striking wooden planks, approaching with unhurried confidence. "You can come out now, madam. They're gone." Katherine raised her head cautiously. A man stood before her, tall and broad-shouldered, his face shadowed by the brim of his Stetson. He holstered his revolver with practiced ease and extended a hand toward her. The late afternoon sun caught the silver sheriff's star pinned to his chest. "Sheriff Samuel Zimmerman," he said, his voice as rough as the terrain surrounding Silver Creek. "Welcome to Wyoming." Katherine placed her trembling hand in his calloused palm and allowed him to help her to her feet. His eyes, a startling shade of blue against his sun-darkened skin, assessed her with a single sweeping glance that seemed to take in everything from her mud-stained traveling dress to the stubborn tilt of her chin. In that moment, as their eyes met for the first time, something shifted in the world around her, a subtle realignment that Katherine couldn't explain, but somehow knew would change the course of her life forever. "Katherine Parker," she managed, withdrawing her hand from his grip and attempting to brush the worst of the dirt from her skirt. "I've come to claim my uncle's property, the mercantile." Sheriff Zimmerman's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered in those blue eyes. "Jacob Parker was your uncle?" "Yes. I received word of his passing last month." The sheriff nodded slowly. "My condolences, Miss Parker. Your uncle was well respected in these parts." He glanced toward the end of the street where the gunman had disappeared. "Though it seems not everyone in Silver Creek is inclined to offer a proper welcome." Katherine followed his gaze, her heart still racing. Was that because of me?" "Hard to say." The sheriff adjusted his hat, squinting against the setting sun. "Town's been on edge lately. Cattle rustlers, land disputes, the usual troubles. But that particular welcome seemed a mite personal." His eyes narrowed. "Did your uncle mention any troubles in his letters?" Katherine shook her head. "I hadn't heard from him in nearly a year before I received word of his death." She straightened her shoulders, determined not to appear as shaken as she felt. "Is the mercantile far? I should like to get settled before dark." "End of the main street." Sheriff Zimmerman gestured with a tilt of his head. "I'll walk you there." "That won't be necessary." "It wasn't an offer, Miss Parker," he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "Until I know who is shooting at you and why, I reckon you shouldn't be walking alone." Katherine wanted to object. She'd been managing on her own since leaving Boston weeks ago, but the memory of bullets splintering wood inches from her head was still too vivid to ignore. "Very well, Sheriff, I appreciate your concern." As they walked down the dusty main street, Katherine felt the eyes of the townspeople following them. Silver Creek wasn't large, perhaps 30 buildings in all, strung along a wide dirt road, but its citizens seemed numerous enough as they paused in their evening activities to watch the newcomer and their sheriff pass by. "Don't mind them," Sheriff Zimmerman said quietly. "News travels fast in small towns, and strangers are rare enough to warrant interest." "Even strangers who arrive amid gunfire?" Katherine asked with a wry smile. A corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Especially those." When they reached the mercantile, Katherine's steps faltered. The building was larger than she had expected. 2 stories of weathered wood with large display windows, one of which was now cracked from the recent gunfire. A faded sign above the door read, "Parker's General Store," in peeling paint. "It's been closed since your uncle passed," the sheriff explained, producing a key from his pocket. "As sheriff, I've been keeping an eye on the property until the rightful owner claimed it." He unlocked the door and pushed it open, gesturing for her to enter first. The interior was dim, dust motes dancing in the shafts of evening light that streamed through the windows. Shelves lined the walls, some still stocked with goods, while others stood empty. A long counter ran along the back, behind which she could see doorways leading to what she presumed were storerooms. "There's living quarters upstairs," Sheriff Zimmerman said, striking a match to light a nearby lantern. The golden glow pushed back the shadows, revealing a space that was surprisingly clean despite having been vacant for weeks. "Your uncle kept everything in good order." Katherine moved through the store, trailing her fingers along the countertop, trying to imagine the uncle she barely remembered working here day after day. "Thank you for watching over his property, Sheriff." "Call me Samuel," he said, then added hastily. "Or Sam. Most folks do." "Sam," she repeated, testing the name. It suited him somehow, solid and unpretentious. "Well, I'm grateful for your assistance today, Sam, but I'm sure you have other duties to attend to." He didn't move toward the door as she'd expected. Instead, he placed the lantern on the counter and crossed his arms, his expression serious once more. "Miss Parker." "Katherine, or Kate, if you prefer." "Katherine," he said, and something about the way her full name sounded in his deep voice sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "I don't believe those men were randomly firing into the street. They were aiming at you." She stared at him, trying to process his words. "But that's absurd. I don't know anyone here. I've never set foot in Wyoming before today." "Maybe not, but you're Jacob Parker's niece, and that might be reason enough for some." He hesitated. "Your uncle's death. It wasn't as straightforward as you might have been told." Katherine's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "I was informed he died of heart failure." "That was the doctor's determination, yes?" Sam's eyes held hers steadily. "But there were circumstances that gave me pause. Jacob had been threatened in the weeks before his death. He'd refused to sell the mercantile to a man named Victor Harlan." "And who is this Harlan?" "Cattle baron. Owns most of the land east of town. He's been buying up businesses in Silver Creek over the past year." Sam's jaw tightened. Some more willingly than others. Katherine sank onto a nearby stool, her mind racing. "You think this Harlan had something to do with my uncle's death, and now he's targeting me because I've inherited the store?" "I can't prove anything about your uncle," Sam admitted, "but those men today, one of them looked like Harlan's foreman." A heavy silence fell between them. Outside, the last rays of sunlight were fading, casting the store into deeper shadow. "What do you suggest I do?" Katherine finally asked. "Return to Boston?" Sam's expression hardened. "Is that what you want to do?" Katherine thought about the life she'd left behind, the empty house after her father's death, the dwindling funds, The unwanted advances from her father's business partner, who had made it clear marriage to him was her only option for financial security. She had come to Wyoming hoping for a fresh start, a chance to build something of her own. "No," she said firmly. "This store is mine by right, and I intend to keep it." Something that might have been approval flickered in Sam's eyes. "Then you shouldn't walk alone, at least not until we get to the bottom of this." He hesitated. "I can't be with you every minute, but I can check in regularly and help you get settled." "I can take care of myself," Katherine insisted, though she knew her words lacked conviction after the day's events. "I don't doubt that," Sam replied, surprising her. "But even the most capable person can use an ally in unfamiliar territory." He glanced around the store. "Besides, I reckon you'll need help getting this place running again." Katherine studied him, trying to discern his motives. In Boston, men who offered assistance inevitably wanted something in return. But there was something straightforward about Samuel Zimmerman that made her inclined to trust him, despite her natural caution. "Very well," she conceded. "I would appreciate your help, Sheriff." "Sam," he corrected again, the hint of a smile softening his features. "I'll come by in the morning to help you take inventory. And Katherine." He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "Lock this behind me and don't open it for anyone you don't know." After he left, Katherine secured the door as instructed and made her way upstairs to explore her new home. The living quarters were simple but comfortable: a small sitting room, a kitchen with a cast-iron stove, a bedroom, and a washroom. Evidence of her uncle's life was everywhere: books on shelves, a half-finished letter on a desk, a pair of reading glasses folded neatly beside an armchair. Katherine unpacked her single trunk, placing her modest collection of belongings alongside her uncle's. As she prepared for bed, exhaustion from the long journey and the day's alarming events finally caught up with her. But despite her fatigue, her mind kept returning to the sheriff's blue eyes and the peculiar sensation she'd felt when he first looked at her, as if in that single glance he had somehow seen past all her careful defenses to the person beneath. "Ridiculous," she murmured to herself as she blew out the lamp. She had far more pressing concerns than dwelling on the handsome sheriff. Tomorrow, she would begin the work of reclaiming her uncle's legacy and establishing herself in Silver Creek. Whatever threats awaited, Katherine Parker had no intention of being intimidated into surrender. But as she drifted toward sleep, she couldn't deny the strange certainty that had settled over her the moment Sheriff Samuel Zimmerman had helped her to her feet. Nothing in her life would ever be the same again. Morning came with golden light streaming through uncurtained windows and the unfamiliar sounds of a town awakening. Katherine dressed quickly in one of her simpler dresses — there was no point in ruining good fabric while cleaning — and set about exploring the mercantile in proper daylight. The store was larger than it had appeared in the dim evening light. The main room held shelves of dry goods, tools, fabrics, and sundries. A glass counter displayed tobacco products and small luxuries like imported candies and perfumes. Through a doorway behind the counter, Katherine found a storeroom filled with barrels, crates, and additional inventory. She was examining the ledger she'd found in her uncle's desk when a knock at the front door startled her. Through the window, she could see Sam standing on the boardwalk, a basket in one hand. "Breakfast," he announced when she opened the door, lifting the basket. "Thought you might not have had time to stock your kitchen yet." The gesture caught her off guard. "That's very thoughtful of you." He set the basket on the counter and removed his hat, revealing dark hair in need of a trim. In the morning light, Katherine could see him more clearly than she had the previous evening. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of squinting against the sun rather than age. "Mrs. Miller at the boarding house sends her regards," he said, unpacking fresh biscuits, a jar of preserves, and a thermos of coffee. "She's curious about the new owner of Parker's Mercantile." "I imagine everyone is," Katherine replied, accepting the cup of coffee he poured for her. The rich aroma made her stomach growl embarrassingly. Sam pretended not to notice as he handed her a biscuit. "Town's been speculating since the stage arrived yesterday. Half think you'll sell to Harlan and head back east. The other half are taking bets on how long you'll last before doing so." Katherine bristled. "And what do you think, Sheriff?" He considered her over the rim of his cup. "I think anyone who survived that welcome yesterday without turning tail has more grit than most give credit for." It wasn't exactly a vote of confidence, but Katherine found herself appreciating his candor nonetheless. "Speaking of yesterday," she said, "have you learned anything about the men who shot at me?" Sam's expression darkened. "Nothing concrete. Harlan's foreman denies being in town, and nobody's willing to contradict him openly." He set his cup down with controlled precision. "Harlan's men provide a lot of business to the local establishments. Folks are reluctant to get on his bad side." "Including the sheriff," Katherine challenged. His eyes met hers, hard as flint. "I don't take sides, Miss Parker. I uphold the law. If I find evidence Harlan or his men broke it, I'll act accordingly." Katherine nodded, chastened by his tone. "I apologize. That was unfair of me." Sam's expression softened slightly. "No need. It's a fair question in a town this size. Sheriffs can be bought as easily as anyone else." He glanced around the store. "Let's take inventory. Sooner we know what you're working with, the sooner you can open for business." They spent the morning cataloging the store's contents. Katherine was pleased to discover the inventory was more substantial than she'd initially thought. Her uncle had been well stocked in essentials, though some perishables would need to be replaced. As they worked, Sam proved to be surprisingly knowledgeable about the mercantile business. "My father ran a store like this in Nebraska when I was growing up," he explained when Katherine commented on it. "I worked there until I was 18. "What made you become a lawman instead?" A shadow crossed his face. "Raiders hit our town during a blizzard. My parents were killed." He continued counting nails as if discussing the weather. "The sheriff at the time tracked the men down, brought them to justice, made an impression." Katherine's heart ached for the young man he'd been. "I'm sorry about your parents." He nodded once, acknowledging her sympathy without inviting more. "What about you? What brought you all the way from Boston to Wyoming territory?" Katherine considered how much to reveal. "After my father died, there wasn't much keeping me in Boston. When I received word about Uncle Jacob, it seemed like an opportunity." "For what?" "Independence," she admitted. "In Boston, a woman alone has limited options. Here, I can run a business, make my own decisions." Sam's gaze was assessing but not judgmental. "It won't be easy." "Few worthwhile things are," she replied. A hint of a smile curved his mouth. True enough, they were interrupted by another knock at the door. This time, it was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands. "Margaret Miller," she introduced herself warmly. "I own the boarding house down the street. Thought I'd come welcome you properly now that you've had a chance to settle in." Over tea, Margaret proved to be a wealth of information about Silver Creek and its inhabitants. She spoke fondly of Jacob Parker, confirming Katherine's impression that her uncle had been well liked. Such a shame about his passing, Margaret sighed. So sudden. One day he was fine, the next, she shook her head. Doc Sullivan said it was his heart, but Jacob never mentioned troubles with it before. Sam caught Katherine's eye from where he was repairing the cracked window, his expression confirming her suspicions that something about her uncle's death warranted further investigation. Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Of course, there were those rumors about Harlan pressuring him to sell. Jacob refused point blank, said the store had been in the Parker family for 20 years and wasn't going anywhere. "Mrs. Miller?" Sam interrupted from across the room. "I'm sure Miss Parker has plenty to do without being burdened by town gossip on her first full day." Margaret flushed slightly. Of course, Sheriff, I didn't mean to pry." She turned back to Katherine. "If you need anything at all, dear, my boarding house is always open to you." After Margaret left, Katherine confronted Sam. "You didn't want her talking about Harlan. He finished hammering in the last nail to secure the replacement window pane before answering." "Margaret means well, but she talks freely. Word would get back to Harlan that we're asking questions." "Isn't that your job, to ask questions when there's suspicion of wrongdoing?" Sam wiped his hands on a rag, his expression guarded. "There's a difference between suspicion and proof, Katherine. Right now, all we have is the former. Then how do we get the latter?" He raised an eyebrow at her use of "we," but didn't comment on it. "First, we get you established here. Make it clear you're not going anywhere. That might force Harlan's hand if he's really after the property." "You want to use me as bait?" Katherine asked incredulously. "I want to protect you," Sam corrected firmly. "But I also want to know what happened to your uncle, and right now you're our best chance of drawing out whoever's responsible." Katherine considered his words. The idea was frightening, but she couldn't deny the logic. "All right. When can we open the store?" Sam looked surprised by her ready agreement. "You'll need to restock some items. I can take you to meet the local suppliers tomorrow. And in the meantime," he glanced out the newly repaired window, his expression thoughtful. "In the meantime, I think it's time you met the rest of Silver Creek. There's a social at the church this evening. Most of the town will be there." Katherine hesitated. "Is that wise? If someone here wishes me harm?" "They won't try anything with the whole town watching," Sam assured her. "Besides, if you're going to run this store, you need to know your customers." He paused. "I'll be there too. You won't be alone." Something about the way he said those last words, "You won't be alone," resonated deeply with Katherine. Since her father's death, aloneness had been her constant companion, a state she'd come to accept as her lot in life. The simple promise that, for one evening at least, she wouldn't face the world entirely on her own brought an unexpected lump to her throat. "Very well," she managed after a moment. "What time shall I expect you?" 6 o'clock, he replied, reaching for his hat. "Wear something nice. First impressions matter in a town like this." After he left, Katherine spent the afternoon continuing her inventory and cleaning the store. By late afternoon, she was satisfied that with a few days' work and some restocking, Parker's Mercantile could be ready to open for business by the end of the week. As the sun began its descent, she bathed and changed into her best dress, a deep blue silk with modest lace trim. It was somewhat formal for a church social in a frontier town, but it was the nicest garment she owned that wasn't black mourning attire. She pinned her hair up carefully, allowing a few curls to frame her face, and added her mother's pearl earrings, the one piece of jewelry she'd kept when selling her parents' possessions, to fund her journey west. Sam arrived promptly at 6, and Katherine was startled by his transformation. Gone was the dusty sheriff's uniform, replaced by a clean dark suit and crisp white shirt. He'd trimmed his hair and beard, and the effect was striking. For the first time, Katherine allowed herself to acknowledge what she'd been trying to ignore since their first meeting. Samuel Zimmerman was a handsome man. "You look lovely," he said simply, offering his arm. Katherine took it, feeling oddly self-conscious. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself, Sheriff." A slight smile tugged at his mouth. "Don't sound so surprised." The church was a short walk from the mercantile, and already buzzing with activity when they arrived. Tables laden with food lined one wall, while a small group of musicians played lively tunes at the front. Lanterns and candles cast a warm glow over the proceedings, and the air was filled with conversation and laughter. Their entrance caused a noticeable lull in the noise. Dozens of curious eyes turned toward them, and Katherine fought the urge to retreat. Sam's hand came to rest reassuringly at the small of her back. "Folks," he said in a carrying voice, "I'd like you to meet Miss Katherine Parker, Jacob's niece and the new owner of Parker's Mercantile." A murmur ran through the crowd, and then a tall man with silver at his temples stepped forward, offering his hand. "Dr. Sullivan," he introduced himself. "Your uncle was a good friend. We're glad to have another Parker in Silver Creek." His warm welcome seemed to break the ice. People gathered around, introducing themselves and offering condolences for her uncle and welcomes to the community. Katherine did her best to remember names and faces, knowing they would soon be her customers and neighbors. Sam stayed close, occasionally prompting her with information about individuals or quietly explaining connections between families. His steady presence made navigating the social waters far less daunting than it might have been otherwise. "Sheriff," a deep voice interrupted as they were speaking with the blacksmith and his wife. "Aren't you going to introduce me to our newest resident?" Katherine turned to find herself facing a distinguished-looking man in his 40s, expensively dressed and exuding confidence. Beside her, she felt Sam tense almost imperceptibly. "Miss Parker," Sam said formally. "This is Victor Harlan." So this was the man who might have had something to do with her uncle's death. Katherine studied him carefully, noting the cold calculation behind his pleasant smile. "Miss Parker." Harlan took her hand, bowing slightly. "A pleasure to make your acquaintance. I was sorry to hear about Jacob. He was a determined man." "Thank you," Katherine replied, carefully extracting her hand from his grasp. "I'm looking forward to continuing his legacy at the Mercantile." Harlan's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened slightly. "Ah, yes, the store. I understand it's been closed for some weeks now. Must be quite a challenge to restart such a business, especially for someone unfamiliar with the territory." "Katherine is a quick study," Sam interjected before she could respond, "and she has the support of the community." Harlan's gaze shifted to Sam, something unspoken passing between the men. "Indeed? How neighborly of you, Sheriff." He turned back to Katherine. "Should you find the burden too great, Miss Parker, I would be happy to discuss purchasing the property. I could offer a very generous sum enough to set you up comfortably back east." "That's kind of you, Mr. Harlan," Katherine replied coolly, "but I have no intention of selling. My uncle built that business to serve this community, and I plan to honor his intentions." For a brief moment, Harlan's pleasant mask slipped, revealing something dangerous beneath. Then it was gone, replaced once more by polite charm. "Well, the offer stands should you change your mind. If you'll excuse me, I see the mayor has arrived." As Harlan walked away, Katherine let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You did well," Sam murmured, "but he's not a man who takes rejection easily." Was that a threat, just now? A warning, at minimum. Sam's eyes followed Harlan across the room. "Be careful, Katherine. He didn't get to where he is by playing fair." The rest of the evening passed more pleasantly. Katherine danced with several of the town's eligible bachelors, though she noticed Sam watching from the sidelines, declining all invitations from the local women. When the musicians struck up a waltz, he finally approached her, hand extended. "May I?" Katherine placed her hand in his, ignoring the flutter in her stomach as he led her onto the dance floor. "I was beginning to think you didn't dance, Sheriff." "Only when the partner is worth the effort," he replied, his hand settling at her waist as they began to move with the music. Katherine was surprised to discover he was an excellent dancer, leading her confidently through the waltz. For a man who embodied the rugged frontier lawman in so many ways, Samuel Zimmerman contained unexpected depths. "You dance very well," she commented. "My mother insisted," he replied with a hint of a smile. "Said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like an untamed buffalo." The image made Katherine laugh, and Sam's eyes warmed at the sound. For a moment, they weren't a sheriff and a shopkeeper or a protector, and his charge they were simply a man and woman enjoying a dance together. All too soon, the music ended. Sam's hand lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary before he stepped back, the spell broken. "We should go," he said, his voice lower than usual. "It's getting late." The walk back to the Mercantile was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. The night air was cool, stars scattered like diamond dust across the vast Wyoming sky. In Boston, buildings and fog often obscured the heavens, but here they stretched endlessly, making Katherine feel simultaneously small and somehow part of something immense. At her door, Sam paused. "I'll come by in the morning to take you to meet the suppliers." "Thank you for tonight," Katherine said, "for introducing me to everyone. It made things easier." He nodded, his expression unreadable in the dim light from the lantern she'd left burning in the window. "Lock up behind me. I'll check the alley and back entrance before I leave." As she watched him disappear around the corner of the building, Katherine pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the rapid beat of her heart beneath her palm. It would be all too easy to develop feelings for a man like Samuel Zimmerman. But she had come to Wyoming for independence, not to lose her heart to the first kind man she encountered. Still, as she secured the door and prepared for bed, she couldn't help but recall the feeling of his hand at her waist, the steady blue of his eyes as they danced, and the peculiar sense of safety she felt in his presence. "Focus on the store," she told her reflection sternly as she brushed out her hair. "That's why you're here." But even as she drifted off to sleep, her mind conjured the image of Sam's rare smile, and the dreams that followed were not of merchandise or business matters at all. The next few days fell into a pattern. Sam would arrive early, often bringing breakfast, and they would work together on preparing the Mercantile for reopening. He introduced her to local suppliers, the farmer who provided fresh produce, the miller who ground the flour, the ranchers who supplied meat to the butcher who would, in turn, provide cuts for her to sell. Katherine was pleasantly surprised to discover her uncle had maintained excellent relationships with these suppliers. Many spoke fondly of Jacob Parker's fair dealings and expressed their eagerness to continue working with his niece. Throughout their rounds, Sam remained close at her side. If anyone found it unusual that the sheriff was devoting so much time to the new shopkeeper, they didn't comment on it openly. Katherine suspected the town had its own theories about their relationship, but she couldn't bring herself to care about the gossip. Sam's presence made her feel secure in a way she hadn't since her father's death. More than that, she enjoyed his company. Beneath his taciturn exterior, Sam possessed a sharp mind and dry wit that emerged in unexpected moments. He was well read for a frontier lawman, and their conversations often turned to books they had both enjoyed or current events in the wider world. On the fourth day after her arrival, Katherine was ready to reopen Parker's mercantile. She'd cleaned every surface, organized the inventory, and created attractive displays in the front windows. With Sam's help, she'd repainted the sign above the door, the fresh lettering proclaiming Parker's General Store in bold red against a white background. "It looks good," Sam said, standing beside her on the boardwalk as they admired their handiwork. Jacob would be proud. Katherine felt a pang of regret that she'd never know her uncle better. From everything she'd learned in the past days, Jacob Parker had been a man worth knowing, honest, hard-working, and kind. His absence left a hole in the community that she hoped in time she might partially fill. "Do you really think people will come?" she asked, voicing the fear that had been growing as the grand reopening approached. "What if Harlan has more influence than we thought? What if no one wants to cross him by shopping here?" Sam's hand came to rest on her shoulder, warm and reassuring. "This town needed your uncle's store. They'll need yours too. Besides," he added with the hint of a smile, "you made quite an impression at the social. Half the unmarried men in town have asked me about you since." Katherine felt her cheeks warm. "And what did you tell them?" "That they should direct their questions to you," he replied, though something in his tone suggested he might have been less diplomatic than he claimed. "Speaking of Harlan, there's been no sign of his men since that first day. Either he's biding his time, or he's reconsidering his approach. Or he wasn't involved at all, and we've been jumping at shadows," Katherine suggested. Sam's expression turned serious. "Trust me, Katherine. Harlan wants this property, and he's not a man accustomed to being denied what he wants." "Then we'll just have to be vigilant," she said with more confidence than she felt. "Now, should we open the doors? It's nearly time." The first day exceeded Katherine's cautious expectations. A steady stream of customers visited the store, many out of curiosity about the new proprietress, but most making purchases as well. By closing time, the cash box was satisfyingly heavy, and Katherine's feet ached from standing all day. Sam arrived as she was locking up, his expression concerned. "I heard about the crowd. Everything goes smoothly?" "Perfectly," Katherine assured him, unable to keep the pride from her voice. It seems Silver Creek was indeed ready for the mercantile to reopen. Relief softened his features. "Good. That's good." "Were you worried?" she asked, touched by his concern. "Just being cautious," he replied, though something in his tone suggested there was more to it than that. "I'll walk you to the cafe for dinner. You must be hungry after such a busy day." The cafe was crowded, but the owner, a jovial woman named Beatrice, found them a small table in the corner. As they ate, Katherine noticed several townspeople nodding in approval at her presence. "I think I'm being accepted," she murmured to Sam. He followed her gaze, noting the friendly looks being sent their way. "Told you, Silver Creek needs its mercantile." He hesitated, then added, "And maybe they're pleased to see their sheriff taking an interest in something besides work for a change." Katherine's pulse quickened at the implication. "Is that what you're doing, Sam? Taking an interest?" His eyes met hers across the table, serious and intent. "You know I am." Before she could respond, the cafe door banged open, admitting a breathless young man who spotted Sam and hurried to their table. "Sheriff! Fire at the Jenkins place. They're saying it's bad." Sam was on his feet instantly. "Get the bucket brigade organized. I'll be right there." He turned to Katherine, his expression torn. "I have to go." "Of course," she said, standing as well. "Is there anything I can do?" "Stay here," he instructed. "I'll come find you when it's over." The cafe emptied quickly as news of the fire spread, men rushing to help and women gathering to prepare food and bandages for the firefighters. Katherine joined the latter group, helping Beatrice pack baskets with sandwiches and coffee for the men who would be working through the night. Hours passed with no word from Sam. Katherine found herself growing increasingly anxious as reports filtered back to the cafe the fire was spreading. Several buildings were at risk. Men had been injured. Finally, near midnight, Sam appeared in the doorway, his face smudged with soot. Exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "It's contained," he reported to the gathered women. "We lost the Jenkins barn and part of their house, but the rest of the buildings are safe." "Was anyone hurt?" Beatrice asked, already packing fresh bandages. "Minor burns, mostly. Doc Sullivan's treating them now." Sam's eyes found Katherine's across the room, and the relief in them matched what she felt at seeing him safe. The women dispersed to deliver food and supplies to the firefighters, leaving Katherine alone with Sam in the cafe. "You look exhausted," she said softly, approaching him. "Let me help you clean up." He didn't resist as she led him to a chair and poured water from a pitcher into a basin. With gentle hands, she washed the soot from his face, his eyes never leaving hers as she worked. "Thank you," he said when she finished. "It's nothing," she replied, suddenly self-conscious about their proximity. "I should get back to the mercantile. It's late." "I'll walk you," Sam said, rising despite his obvious fatigue. "That's not necessary. You've done enough tonight." His expression turned stubborn. "I said I'd come find you when it was over. I meant to see you home safely, too." Katherine recognized the futility of arguing with him in this mood. "All right, but then you're going to get some rest." The walk back to the mercantile was quiet, both too tired for conversation. At her door, Katherine turned to bid Sam good night and found him looking at her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Katherine," he began, his voice rough with emotion. Before he could continue, the sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted them. A rider galloped down the main street, reining in sharply when he spotted them. "Sheriff, thank God I found you. Harlan's men, they're at the Jenkins place. They're saying the fire was set deliberately, that Jenkins owes Harlan money. There's going to be trouble." Sam's expression hardened. "Get to the jail. Wake my deputy. Tell him to meet me at the Jenkins farm with rifles." The rider nodded and spurred his horse back into motion. "I have to go," Sam said to Katherine, his voice tight with frustration. "I know," she replied, fighting her disappointment. "Be careful, Sam." He hesitated, then leaned forward and pressed a swift, hard kiss to her forehead. "Lock your doors. I'll come back as soon as I can." Then he was gone, running toward the livery stable where his horse was kept. Katherine watched until he disappeared from sight, her heart racing from that brief contact. Whatever he had been about to say before they were interrupted, she suspected it would have changed everything between them. Inside the mercantile, Katherine secured the doors and windows as instructed, then climbed the stairs to her living quarters. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her as she worried about Sam confronting Harlan's men. The fire suddenly seemed suspicious. Had it been set deliberately to draw attention away from something else? A noise from downstairs jolted her from these thoughts. Katherine sat up in bed, straining to hear. It came again, the unmistakable sound of the back door being forced open. Her heart hammering, Katherine slipped from bed and reached for the revolver Sam had insisted she keep nearby. He'd taught her to use it during the past days, and though she was no expert, she knew enough to be dangerous at close range. Quietly, she made her way down the back stairs that led directly to the storeroom. The door at the bottom was ajar, pale moonlight filtering through from the window beyond. Katherine could hear men moving in the main store area, their voices low but audible. "Find the ledger," one was saying. "Harlan says it'll be in the desk or the safe." "What about the woman?" another asked. "Don't worry about her unless she gets in the way. We just need the book." Katherine's mind raced. The ledger? Why would Harlan want her uncle's business records? Unless those records contained something that implicated him in Jacob's death. The realization struck her with certainty. Her uncle must have discovered something about Harlan's activities, perhaps recorded evidence in his business ledger. That was why Harlan wanted the mercantile so badly, not for the property itself, but to destroy whatever proof Jacob had collected against him. And now his men were here to find it, while the town was distracted by the fire at the Jenkins farm. A fire that had likely been set for exactly this purpose. Katherine knew she should retreat, barricade herself upstairs and wait for Sam to return. But the ledger was important evidence that might finally bring Harlan to justice for whatever he had done to her uncle. Decision made. She eased through the storeroom toward the main shop floor. The ledger wasn't in the desk or safe as the men believed. Katherine had found it days ago, hidden in a hollowed-out book in her uncle's bedroom. Whatever secrets it contained, Jacob had been careful to keep them concealed. She needed to get past the intruders and upstairs to retrieve it. From her position behind a stack of crates, Katherine could see two men searching the shop, rifling through drawers and cabinets with increasing frustration. "It's not here," one growled. "Check upstairs." Katherine's time had run out. As the men moved toward the stairs, she stepped from her hiding place, the revolver steady in her hands. "Stop right there," she commanded, her voice remarkably calm despite her racing heart. The men froze, then slowly turned to face her. In the dim light, she recognized one as Harlan's foreman from the description Sam had provided. "Miss Parker," he said smoothly, "this is a misunderstanding. Mr. Harlan sent us to deliver a message since the sheriff's occupied." "At midnight? Through my back door?" Katherine kept the revolver aimed at his chest. "I don't think so. I believe you're looking for my uncle's ledger." The men exchanged glances. "Now, miss, be reasonable. Put that gun down before someone gets hurt." "The only ones in danger of getting hurt are the two of you if you don't leave immediately," Katherine replied. "I've already fired a warning shot out the window. The townspeople will be here any minute." It was a bluff she hadn't fired at all, but in the darkness, with most of the town already awake due to the fire, it was plausible enough to give the men pause. "Let's go," the foreman muttered to a companion. "We'll try another approach." They backed toward the rear door, keeping their eyes on Katherine and her gun. As they reached the storeroom, the foreman's expression darkened. "This isn't over, Miss Parker. Harlan always gets what he wants in the end. Not this time, Katherine replied steadily. Only when she heard the back door close behind them did Katherine allow herself to lower the gun, her hands suddenly shaking with delayed fear. She sank onto a chair, drawing deep breaths to calm herself. When she felt steadier, she hurried upstairs to retrieve the ledger from its hiding place. Whatever it contained had been worth breaking into her store to find. Katherine was determined to discover what her uncle had known about Victor Harlan. The ledger looked ordinary enough, columns of neat handwriting detailing purchases, sales, and inventory. But as Katherine turned the pages, she noticed occasional entries that seemed out of place. Coded references, she realized. Jacob had been recording something beyond simple business transactions. Katherine was still puzzling over these entries when pounding on the front door startled her. Cautiously, gun in hand, she approached the window and peered out. Sam stood on the boardwalk, his expression frantic. Relief washed through her as she hurried to unlock the door. "Katherine!" He burst inside the moment the door opened, gathering her into his arms before she could speak. Thank God. When I got to the Jenkins place and found it was a diversion, I knew they'd be coming here. "They've already been and gone," Katherine said, her voice muffled against his chest. "They were looking for this." She held up the ledger. Sam released her reluctantly, taking the book from her hands. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine. I convinced them the town was on its way." She watched as he flipped through the pages. "My uncle was recording something in code. I think it's evidence against Harlan." Sam's expression turned grim as he examined the entries. "Jacob came to me a month before he died. Said he had suspicions about Harlan's cattle operation. Thought he was rustling from the smaller ranches, then selling the beeves with altered brands." He tapped a page. "These dates match reports of missing cattle, and these names, they're ranchers who've been forced to sell to Harlan after losing too much stock." That's why Harlan wanted the mercantile, Katherine realized. Not for the property, but to destroy this evidence. And why he needed Jacob out of the way, Sam added darkly. "Your uncle was too honest to be bought off or scared away." Katherine sank into a chair, the implications settling heavily upon her. "Do you think Harlan killed my uncle?" "I think it's more likely than not," Sam replied, his expression hardening. "But proving it will be difficult. Heart failure leaves few traces, and it's been weeks since his death." "But this ledger, it provides motive at least." Sam nodded slowly. "It's a start, combined with tonight's break-in and the fire. It might be enough to convince the circuit judge to investigate further." He set the ledger aside and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Katherine, I need to go after Harlan's men. I can't let them report back to him about the ledger." She tightened her grip on his hands. "You can't face them alone. My deputy's waiting at the edge of town. We'll track them together." His blue eyes held hers intently. "I need you to stay here. Keep the doors locked until I return. Will you do that for me?" Katherine wanted to argue, to insist on accompanying him, but she recognized the determination in his expression. "Yes, but promise me you'll be careful." Something softened in Sam's face. "I promise." He hesitated, then leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers. "When this is over, you and I need to talk about what's happening between us." Katherine's heart skipped a beat. "And what is happening, Sheriff Zimmerman?" Instead of answering with words, Sam closed the distance between them, his lips finding hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with an intensity that left her breathless. When they finally parted, his eyes were dark with emotion. That he said simply. That's what's happening. Before Katherine could respond, he was on his feet, moving toward the door with reluctant purpose. Lock this behind me. I'll be back by dawn. True to his word, Sam returned as the first light of day was breaking over Silver Creek. Katherine had spent the intervening hours examining her uncle's ledger more closely, deciphering what she could of his coded entries. When the knock came at the door, she rushed to open it, relief flooding through her at the sight of Sam, dirty and tired, but unharmed. We caught them, he reported without preamble. They've confessed to the break-in and setting the fire as a diversion. They're in the jail now. And Harlan? Gone, Sam said grimly. Must have had a backup plan in case his men failed. His house is empty, valuables gone. Looks like he fled when he realized his scheme was unraveling. Katherine felt a mixture of disappointment and relief. While she wanted justice for her uncle, the thought of confronting Harlan again had filled her with dread. Will you pursue him? I've sent telegrams to sheriffs in neighboring counties. He won't get far with his description circulating. Sam's exhaustion was evident as he sank into a chair. The important thing is he's gone from Silver Creek. His influence here is broken. Katherine brought him coffee, which he accepted gratefully. What happens now? The circuit judge arrives next week. Harlan's men will stand trial for arson and breaking and entering. With their testimony and your uncle's ledger, we'll build a case against Harlan himself. He took a long sip of coffee. It might take time, but he'll face justice eventually. They sat in companionable silence as the sun rose higher, painting the mercantile in golden light. Katherine found herself studying Sam's profile, noting the stubborn set of his jaw, the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his dark hair curled slightly where it was too long at his collar. You need to rest, she said softly. He turned to her with a weary smile. So do you. It's been a long night. Sam, Katherine hesitated, gathering her courage. About what happened before you left. His expression grew serious. I meant it, Katherine, every bit of it. We've only known each other a few days, she reminded him, though her heart was racing at his words. Some things don't need time. He set his cup aside and leaned forward, his eyes intent on hers. From the moment I saw you diving for cover on your first day here, something inside me shifted. I can't explain it better than that. Katherine knew exactly what he meant. That inexplicable certainty she'd felt when their eyes first met had only grown stronger with each passing day. I came to Wyoming for independence, she said softly. To build a life on my own terms. I know, Sam took her hands in his. And I would never ask you to give that up. The mercantile is yours. Your life is yours. I'm just asking if there might be room in it for me too. The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability beneath his usual strength, touched something deep within Katherine. This was not the controlled, confident sheriff of Silver Creek speaking, but simply a man laying his heart bare before the woman who had claimed it. There's room, she whispered, her voice catching. There's been room since that first day when you helped me up from the dirt and promised I wouldn't walk alone again. Joy transformed Sam's face, erasing the exhaustion and worry of the night. He drew her into his arms, his kiss gentle but filled with promise. Katherine melted against him, marveling at how right it felt to be held by this man she'd known for less than a week, but who already felt essential to her existence. When they parted, Sam kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. I should warn you I'm stubborn, set in my ways, and I work too much. Katherine laughed softly. And I'm headstrong, independent to a fault. And I have no idea how to run a mercantile in Wyoming territory. Sounds like we'll balance each other out nicely. His smile was tender as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. I'm not asking for promises yet, Katherine. Just time to see where this leads. I think we both already know where it's leading, she replied, surprising herself with her certainty. But time sounds good. We have plenty of it now. Sam's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. Yes, we do. And I intend to make the most of every minute. True to his word, in the months that followed, Sam became a fixture at Parker's Mercantile. He helped Katherine learn the rhythms of the business, introduced her to the particular needs and preferences of Wyoming customers, and spent his evenings with her on the small porch behind the store, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. Victor Harlan was eventually apprehended trying to cross into Canada. The testimony of his men, combined with Jacob Parker's meticulous records, led to his conviction for cattle rustling, fraud, and conspiracy. Though they couldn't prove he had directly caused Jacob's death, the judge sentenced him to 20 years in the territorial prison, effectively ending his reign of intimidation in Silver Creek. Katherine thrived as the proprietress of Parker's Mercantile. Under her management, the store expanded its offerings to include more items appealing to the women of the town, fabrics and patterns from back east, hairpins and ribbons, even a small selection of books that quickly became popular during the long winter months. As winter gave way to spring, Sam began building a house on a plot of land just outside town, close enough for him to continue his duties as sheriff, but with space for gardens and perhaps, someday, children. He never explicitly stated his intentions, but Katherine understood the meaning behind each beam and board he carefully placed. On a warm evening in May, exactly 1 year after Katherine's arrival in Silver Creek, Sam took her riding to a beautiful spot overlooking the valley. As the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, he knelt before her and offered a simple gold ring. I told you that day that some things don't need time, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I knew then what I know with absolute certainty now that I want to spend the rest of my days with you, Katherine Parker. Will you marry me? Katherine, who had once traveled west seeking independence, found herself saying yes without hesitation to this man who had shown her that true freedom could exist within the bonds of love. The mercantile would remain hers, their partnership extending to business as well as life, but she would no longer face the world alone. They were married in the small church where they had first danced together, the entire town turning out to celebrate the union of their sheriff and shopkeeper. As they spoke their vows, Katherine remembered that first day in Silver Creek, the gunfire, the fear, and the moment a tall stranger had helped her to her feet and promised she wouldn't walk alone. In that single moment, with one steady glance from eyes as blue as the Wyoming sky, her life had changed forever. The cowboy had looked at her once, and she had never walked alone again. And she never would.